speaking of the environment, to change gears here for a second, I saw something interesting that people in Europe, there's a huge movement now. They want to repair the pipeline that they blew up.
The one that Biden blew up?
Yeah, because of inflation, because of energy costs. So, okay, so the economics is real. Like, it's not like something that is a theory. It's real. If you cut off the supply of your gas and you have to bring it from the United States and send it over water and not just turn on the tap in Poland to get it, you're going to pay more for it. And then if your purchasing power of your fiat money is going down, and then it's going to be even more for it. Mm-hmm. So that was known before we blew this up. Before we blew up the pipeline, we knew that if you blow it up, you're going to be paying a lot more for your energy. And of course, people are saying, I don't care. I don't care if I pay more for energy. I'm on principle, I'm going to be blowing up this pipeline. Okay, so you blew up the pipeline. Now, 2 years later, energy is doubled and you can't afford food. You have to pick, do I heat my house or do I buy pizza, right? Those are the choices people are making. You're saying, you know what, maybe we should repair that pipeline. And this is where we're at in this economy in the world today, is that it's been allowed to disintegrate to a point where the cost of putting it back together now is beyond the reach of any practical solutions, financial solutions. There is no practical solutions to repair the damage to the global economy at this point.
How? So let's unpack that. Let's walk through. So we've talked a little bit about this before in this show, but it's important for people to understand. So like you say, it's unrepairable. Mm-hmm. How is this going to then play out? Like,
right.
It's pretty scary to think about.
Well, there's two paths. One is hyperinflationary collapse, or one is a deflationary collapse, which would mean that if the hyperinflationary collapse, I think, is easier to understand. So the government simply keep printing more money to throw at the problem, but not in a managed way. Remember, they tried to stop the Gulf oil spill with golf balls. Remember that whole episode? Like, that was just spewing for how many weeks that go on? And they're like down there with golf balls or like Band-Aids. Like, eventually they figured something out.
It's bubble gum.
But the environmental damage was fucking nuts, right? And again, that's BP. I'm sure that somebody decided to cut some corners somewhere.
An oil company
with like a $40 nut or bolt. They could have not.
Yeah, of course. It's
like 9/11, of course. They could have put $50 locks on the cabins of the pilot's cabin.
Oh man, I mean,
every jet should have had a lock to the cabin. I mean, just because some lunatic might hijack the plane, but of course that would have cost $50 per plane. That could add up. Graham, you might be spending like $1 million on locks.
No.
Right.
Wow.
So, yep. I mean, that was an oversight, obvious oversight, cost cutting there that led to that freaking tragedy that could have been avoided with some common sense. Like, we want to help our customers, not put them in grave risk. Now, did they learn anything? No, they decided at Boeing to cut back.
They keep cutting.
So now the planes are falling out of the sky like there's a 9/11 every day. Because the lesson they learned from 9/11 was spend less, cut back more. Right?
That's what we did.
That's what we did wrong.
More cutback.
We should have been less responsible. Okay, good guys. So the source of the river of that thread was what? Now I've lost. I went down a dark alley. And I'm lost.
I love it when we get lost.
Can you help me?
Ranting.
What was the...
Here we're talking about the two possible scenarios.
Oh, yeah, okay. There's two possible scenarios. So the world economy is irreparable. Okay? There's no fix, right? Because the structure has collapsed. It's like 9/11. Okay, you're not going to pick up the pieces and rebuild the Twin Towers from the shit that just fell down. That's dust.
Right.
Just dust. It's dust. It's in a cloud of dust. There's not coming back. So the global economy is becoming vaporized, essentially. So they'll continue to print money and throw it at the problem and hope it works.
It just kind of kicks the can down the road.
Right. But we know that the reason that it got to be a problem to begin with is by printing too much money. and it didn't go into the places where it should have gone. It went into the pockets of the people printing the money through the Cantillon effect. So that's what. But at the prices, that's probably what will happen, and it means that you go into a much more aggressive inflationary environment, and there'll be a lot more people going broke and homeless because the cost of food will be beyond the reach of just about anybody. Okay, so that's the second scenario would be a deflationary collapse. So this would be that they're going to cut the money printing.
I should say this real quick. The first scenario, probably then, if everyone's losing jobs, then what's also on top of that is social unrest,
totally
rioting, food, riots in the streets, all that stuff that Ray Dalio talks about.
Yes.
So that's to add to that potential scenario.
Right. Second scenario, and this is the more responsible scenario, would be to default.
So it's the one we're not going to do.
Right. So the one we're not going to do. We've done it once before, and I'll mention why and how in a second. But it would be to default on our debt, on the U.S. debt. We would default. We would tell China that we're not paying the debt, and all of our creditors would get nothing. Say we're defaulting. So the economy would immediately crash 98%. You would have an immediate fucking disaster. But you could build out of that. You could recover within, like Iceland, when they got hit with the 2008 financial crisis, they actually went after the banks and they
arrested the bankers.
They arrested the bankers and they defaulted essentially on all their debts. They defaulted. They went the default route, and the economy went to zero effectively. And they rebuilt it from scratch, and now they're doing fine. Okay, this is a much smaller economy, and it's in Iceland. It's not the United States of America. It's not a $334 trillion economy. But nevertheless, the responsible thing to do at this point would be to cop to the fact that this debt that we sell is not worth what we say it's worth, and we need to default on it. And we would start from scratch. So everybody would have to pull together. There would have to be social cohesion. Your neighbor would be broke. You'd have to go and give him a ham sandwich, to keep him alive for another 6 months or whatever.
You'd have to work together. Like, hey, I'm growing carrots in my backyard. You're growing apples. I'll trade.
Yep.
So we both can eat.
That's the only actual way to survive as intact as a country, is to do that. But that's not going to happen. So we know that the wild card would be that the BRICS. You see, when Russia invaded Ukraine, it changed that. I've talked about this before. So the 40-year bull market and the bond market ended, and inflation genie was out of the bottle. I mean, the reason we have inflation right now, in large part because of Russia invading Ukraine. Russia is the biggest commodity producer in the world, and their pricing discovery for commodities, for oil, gas, the world reserve currency is the dollar, and the dollar is really controlled on Wall Street. And also Wall Street gets a commission on all those dollars that circulate in the global economy, and it's a huge money spinner for the United States. But once Russia invaded Ukraine, they said, you know what, we're going to price the commodities ourselves. We don't need you anymore. We're going to get out of the dollar, which everyone is getting out of the dollar. The BRICS are getting out of the dollar. So that means that there's no buffer for the United States. They're going to be paying the full price for oil, gas, food, commodities. You see it in cocoa already. I think cocoa is a canary in the coal mine. It's a harbinger of a much bigger move in commodities. Cocoa price is up like 400%. It's absolutely screaming to the upside. And I think this is a harbinger of greater price appreciation in the whole commodity market. So I think commodity markets in the beginning of an extended multi-year bull market, and commodity prices are going to be going up dramatically,
which will drive inflation.
Which is, of course, it's a bedrock driver of inflation. So steel, iron, gold, silver, cocoa, wheat, right? Pork bellies, right? Food, agriculture, the soft, the hard, all commodities, cotton, right? It just all is going to go double or triple. And because the dream world that America has been living in since the end of World War II, where we get other countries to buy our debt so that we can buy their goods cheaper. It collapses. They won't be buying our debt anymore. So we have to go to the open market and buy the stuff on the open market. And the open market price for gas could be $20 a gallon. The open market price for wheat could be triple what the current price is. So the countries with the commodities, like Russia, they're insulated because they're swapping commodities for that shit. Their global trading currencies are commodities, not dollars. So they are buffered. They're not going to be hurt the way the U.S. would be hurt, because the U.S. has no manufacturing. And, we have corn. We have a lot of corn, but we'd have no steel or anything like that. No industrial capacity, nothing to export. We import stuff. The biggest export firm in America for a long time was garbage. Like, we would send our garbage to China in container ships full of cardboard garbage. And there's a billionaire woman in China who was buying all of America's garbage. All of the cardboard boxes that we sent to China as garbage, she recycled and sold them back to America. She's a billionaire, right? So this is just another story of how some of these trends underlie.
So the existential threat is we're just so stupid, China keeps beating us. That's how we're the existential threat. We say there is an existential threat. It's like, no, they're just smarter than us.
They're competitively beating us. So the TikTok ban is stupid because it's actually owned by a lot of Americans own TikTok stock. It's a publicly traded stock. I mean, Rand Paul did a very nice little video on this, like who actually owns TikTok. It's not Chinese. It's not a Chinese company. You cannot, by definition, call it a Chinese company based on who actually owns that company. And the problem is that they're out competing American social media companies like Facebook and others. So again, capitalism gone amok. Mm-hmm. These guys like Mark Zuckerberg and others with hundreds of billions of dollars can go to Washington and get laws passed by buying the lawmakers to pass laws as a protection racket to go after TikTok and to dissolve TikTok.
Yeah, it's also true, 60% of Gen Z is on TikTok.
Yeah.
And there's all this calling out Israel and America's supporting of Israel. And so there's some messaging that America does not want to get out from TikTok because they can't control TikTok the way they can the American.
They cannot.
Yeah.
We saw during COVID that they had a complete lock on all media, pretty much. TikTok has emerged as a breakaway social media platform that they don't control the narrative. And so they are going after it for those reasons. But they put it under the rubric of China threat, which is, stupid because they could be stumbling into a world war, right? I mean, Russia is basically saying that, look, I mean, if France sends troops to NATO, to Ukraine, to NATO member, I mean, NATO starts putting boots on the ground and starts shooting at us like this, okay, then it's called World War III. And we're ready for it. We've been planning for it. We've got lots of people ready to go. We've got a lot of weapons. We're fucking got a lot of nukes. And,
we all die. Nobody wins.
If that's what you want to do, we'll do it. I mean, we're happy to oblige you in this regard.
America's an insane asylum.
For what reason?
Yeah.
What is the game there? So the short-term gain from the defense contractors is obvious, right? They get to make a big payday. And so that's capitalism run amok, right? That's capitalism brought us this mess. It's extremism, capital extremism. So I make the comparison between radical theocratic fanatics, religious fanatics, and American radical theocratic capitalist fanatics. It's like religious fanatics would pick up a book of spiritual guidance and read a paragraph, and their conclusion would be that they need to go kill some people.
Yeah.
Whereas some capitalists in America will read Adam Smith and decide, based on their interpretation, they need to do massive stock buybacks, disenfranchise people, and kill people in a different way. Right? So they're both terrorists mentality. One wears a three-piece suit and works on Wall Street, and one is wearing different attire and living in another country. Right? But they have the same they're willing, I call them suicide bankers. They blow themselves up and they're friends for money. They'll kill themselves for money, just like a radical theocratic would kill himself for their belief. And it's basically a misreading of the basic text. You know, The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith is one, he wrote another book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments, which explains why markets need to be governed, right? I mean, the invisible hand, which is described in Adam Smith's book, Wealth of Nations, I believe is where he talks about the invisible hand, is what most people focus on as being like, I have license to be a capitalism or an anarcho-capital, no regulations. But they didn't read the rest of Adam Smith's work, which explains the need for regulations. Right?
It's like, you know, people, like you say, they'll just cherry pick stuff out of the Bible.
Right.
That Jesus loves everybody. They kind of gloss over that one to go right to the, or kill you because you're different or whatever. You can do that with any religious text.
That's what they do. So yeah, in the U.S., there had been a great tradition of debate. And as a result, the American character, the American tradition was somewhat egalitarian. And the American dream was real. People could come here and work and get a house, get kids, you know, and from wherever they were. But that is really, really, really out of reach now. I think it might be gone. I mean, completely gone.